President Obama made clear our deep concern about the decision made by the Egyptian armed forces to remove President Morsi from power and to suspend the Constitution. It is also important to acknowledge that tens of millions of Egyptians had legitimate grievances with President Morsi's undemocratic form of governance, and they do not believe that this was a coup.
One of the most respected institutions in the country is their military. And I think their military, on behalf of the citizens, did what they had to do in terms of replacing the elected president. But anything further, I think we'll wait for consultations with the administrations on how we would move ahead.
Charles, there's AEI, I think it's Michael Rubin, wrote that Morsi was able to do in 1 year what it took Mubarak 3 decades to do, which was turn the Egyptian population against him. What do you think the administration should do?
Well, I don't think I've ever said this, but I think Carney actually got it exactly right today. And that is to essentially to take a middle way and postpone our decision. My regard for John McCain is unlimited, but I think he got it wrong when he said that we should suspend aid. What we need to do now is to suspend judgment. And the reason is that we have a paradoxical situation. This was a democratically elected government, but it was a government that was dismantling the democracy under which it was elected. Just one fact. In 1 year, Morsi had more prosecutions of journalists and activists than the Mubarak regime had in 30 years. And remember that Morsi, shortly after his election, he declared that he had dictatorial powers, unrestrained by the judiciary or by the parliament. So if you have a democratically elected government that is dismantling the democracy, you have something unexpected. And that's why I think we've got a lot of lawyers in the State Department, and their job is to find a way around the rigid law that we have or to actually amend it. Because in this situation, what the administration has to do is to wait and see how this develops. If, on the one hand, the Army is able to construct a government of bureaucrats that will start a process to a new constitution and to elections, and secondly, on the part of the Brotherhood, if it decides it's going to go into guerrilla war against the Army the way that the Islamists in Algeria did in '92, in which case we will have an easy choice.
But Charles, you have excoriated the administration numerous times for being out of the Middle East, not being active and engaged and leaving a vacuum there. Now you're saying, don't get in, despite you're the U.S. in this situation. You have a lot of leverage over there.
One of the reasons that we are where we are now is because since the beginning of this administration, the withdrawal from Iraq, the total withdrawal, the withdrawal from Libya after leading from behind, the inaction in Syria, and the way that the policy was completely undetermined in the Mubarak era, they led to a situation where you have a vacuum. But as of today, with the situation changing hourly, we are not in a position to decide which way to go, and it would be a mistake to do it right now. Ambiguity and watching which way it goes is what I think our policy ought to be. Otherwise, we can make a huge mistake if we acted prematurely right now.
Last word, Fred.
The last word is, the problem is we've been waiting around during the entire Obama administration, and we've been buffeted. We haven't had a policy, been buffeted around, and I'm not sure any good now can come from waiting.
Suspension of aid will only hurt our cause and the cause of the Democrats.
Oh, I agree. We should keep the aid because that's one of the levers we have of influence.
And that's what the administration is doing. It's waiting and watching.
I agree with that.
I leave for a week, and last word just goes out the door.
That's what happens.
That's it.
We have made clear all along when it comes to working with states that we are flexible with the way that they implement the Affordable Care Act. The decision to postpone implementation of this provision of the Affordable Care Act will have no significant impact on implementation overall of the Affordable Care Act. And that's because we're interested in getting it right.
There was supposed to be a technical corrections bill at the end of this that never occurred. And what we're seeing right now is the many flaws coming out in this piece of legislation.
Had the employer mandate pushed back. We have a letter from Senator Hatch that says, why is the administration asking for 107% for the federal subsidies before anybody's been paid $1?
Because the entire enterprise was a gigantic bait and switch. The administration tried every gimmick in the book so that the president could say Obamacare won't cost the Treasury a dime. He said it again and again. And anybody over the age of 9 would understand that if you're going to increase, if you're going to give health insurance to 30 million new Americans, of course it's going to increase the cost. It's a law of nature, but they pretended with all the gimmicks. And all these postponements and suspensions are now the parts of the bill that were going to either raise revenue or control cost. The employer mandate was a way to get the fines or the insurance provided by the employer. So that's out of the way. It's going to increase the cost. What was postponed now, which was a way to know if somebody is cheating in getting a subsidy in the exchange, is out the window. It's going to be enormous amounts of abuse. And the idea of enrolling young people, there is no incentive if you're a 20-year-old to spend a fortune on a plane with all kinds of bells and whistles when you pay a fine and it's cost effective.
$95.
So what we're going to end up with is a bill that's going to be implemented because they're going to hook people on the exchanges and the subsidies with all the fraud and abuse. And once people are getting that, we're going to have to raise taxes hugely as a way to cover it, as is done in Canada and in Britain.
This has been a Sunfish production.